The man charged in Tupac Shakur's murder is speaking out from behind bars for the first time. Dwayne "KEEFE" D. Davis insists he was 300 miles away when the rapper was shot. Now he's pointing the finger at someone else.
And opened fire. Tupac.
We should stop all this bullshit with each other, black on black crimes. It's bullshit. We need to wake up our whole community.
Cops just released shocking footage, and in that instant, 27 years of lies and silence came crashing down. The footage of how KEEFE D killed Tupac exposes every terrifying second, every gunshot, and every betrayal, ripping open a wound the world has been afraid to confront for decades. This is the moment the world can no longer look away.
I'm Jim Snyder. Shakur was gunned down here in Las Vegas back in 1996. No one was ever charged, but now a televised confession may be the missing link.
September 7th, 1996 was supposed to be just another loud, electric Vegas night. The strip was glowing, the air was full of music and laughter, and Tupac Shakur was riding high in the passenger seat of a black BMW. Then 4 bullets cut through that night and tore open the future of hip-hop. Glass exploded and blood soaked the leather. Tupac tried to breathe. The strongest voice of a generation was suddenly weak and fading inside a car that could not outrun what had already found him. 6 days later, on September 13th, 1996, Tupac was gone. He was only 25 years old. 2 bullets in his chest, 1 in his arm, 1 in his thigh. That is all it took to change music forever.
And tonight, a source familiar with this investigation tells us that Metro is trying to process an arrest warrant right now against the only man who's still alive, who says he was in the car.
What followed was not closure, it was silent. A loud, cruel silence that lasted for 27 years. No arrest, no charges, just theories, rumors, documentaries, and endless arguments about who did it and why. The hip-hop world froze in that moment and never fully recovered. Fans demanded justice. His mother carried grief in front of the cameras while the system carried nothing. Tupac's death became a wound that never healed. Every new generation heard his voice but never heard the truth.
So were you there that night in that car? What was your role?
No, I wasn't there. I wasn't there at all. No car or nothing. I wasn't even in Vegas. They ain't got no proof of it in Vegas. They ain't got no gun, no car, no KPD, no nothing.
27 years is a long time to wait for answers. 27 years of anniversaries. 27 years of candles and questions. 27 years of a case that the world thought would never move again. But behind that silence, something was not as quiet as it seemed. Someone had been talking. Someone had been telling pieces of the story for years. Interviews, books, statements, half confessions scattered through time. The world just did not want to believe that the truth had been sitting in front of them all along. Then came July 17th, 2023.
I'm innocent. I ain't killed nobody, never did ever kill nobody. They don't have no evidence against me.
KEEFE confessed that his nephew, Orlando Anderson, fired those fatal shots. Police say Anderson was the main suspect in the murder, but never faced charges. Anderson since died.
Early that morning, SWAT teams surrounded a house in Henderson, Nevada. Doors were forced open. The cameras rolled. And just like that, the past stopped hiding. Investigators moved through the home carefully, collecting anything that might still carry the weight of a murder committed in 1996. By the end of that raid, police had seized 46 items: USB drives, hard drives, old notes, a copy of Vibe magazine, a book titled Compton Street Legend. Not just random things, pieces of a life that had been circling this case for decades. That book in particular did not read like a normal story. It read like a man trying to unload something heavy from his chest. Less memoir, more confession. And all of it was now in police hands.
Yeah, confirmed. Thanks for the taser. Are we clearing that room?
What made the raid even more unsettling was what came next. The search was not short. It lasted nearly 13 hours. 13 hours of law enforcement combing through a house tied directly to the most famous unsolved murder in music history. On August 9th, 2023, police released the video from that raid. Almost 13 hours of footage. Much of it was redacted, but what remained was enough to shake the public. It was not dramatic. There were no big speeches or sudden reveals. The footage did something far worse. It whispered. Watching investigators move through the rooms, opening drawers, examining devices, and stacking evidence felt like watching time itself being peeled back. Every item on the table seemed to say the same thing. This story never ended. It only waited.
Dwayne "KEEFE D. Davis, the uncle of the main suspect in Tupac Shakur's murder, made a shocking confession on television. KEEFE D. says he was riding in the car when someone riding with him fired shots into another car, killing Tupac.
The more the footage circulated, the heavier the atmosphere became. Those seized items were no longer just objects. They were tied to years of statements and old interviews that suddenly made more sense than anyone wanted to admit. For decades, pieces of the truth had been floating around. The raid pulled them into one place and forced the world to look.
So this is the biggest development in the Tupac murder case since this all happened, since the murder happened. They never served a search warrant and, showed up at someone's house with the SWAT team back in 1996. So this is definitely, it can't be overstated how big of a deal this is.
For law enforcement, this was the moment they had been building toward. Without saying it out loud, the case that haunted their department for nearly 30 years was breathing again, and the pressure was no longer on the past. It was a present. People started connecting dots that had been ignored for too long. Old words spoken casually, old claims brushed off as noise. Everything now sounded different. The silence that protected the case for so long finally cracked. The weight of 27 years came crashing down in a single summer.
He had the fucking, man, proffer deals, they don't record. You know
Oh, really?
You know they
That's part
don't
of the deal.
record that shit, dude.
Okay, I didn't know that.
FBI don't record. He was set up there doing that illegal shit, dude. That shit was illegal. I would have never said nothing if I knew he had a fucking thing in his pocket.
What made it more disturbing was how close the truth had always been. The man at the center of it had not been hiding in the shadows. He had been visible, talking, writing, being interviewed, existing in plain sight while Tupac's family and fans waited for answers that never came.
American citizen, they act like I'm guilty before I give the chance. Let's not rush to say I ran. This is wrong.
The footage from the raid did not scream guilt. It whispered something even more chilling. This was not a mystery being solved. This was a truth being collected. And once those pieces were in police hands, the future of the case was no longer a question. It was a countdown. By the end of 2023, the world would finally see what happens when a legend meets evidence. But that night in July was the real turning point. The night the past was dragged into the light and refused to go back into the dark. For years, there was this one figure in the background of the Tupac story. Not loud, not famous, not dramatic, just present, always present, like the quiet guy at the back of the room who somehow knows everything about the fire but keeps sipping his drink. That man was KEEFE D.
That was supposed to be a fucking secret to the fucking, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
They even said sue his motherfucking ass.
While the world argued and investigators stalled, KEEFE D was talking a lot in interviews, podcasts, books, and random conversations that somehow made their way online. He talked about the car. He talked about the gun. He talked about the moment. He talked about sitting inside that vehicle while history was being rewritten in bullets. And the strangest part is that for years, no one touched him. No charges, no handcuffs. Just cameras and microphones followed him around while Tupac's family carried grief in silence. That contrast was brutal. One man reliving the night in public, a mother burying her son in private. Fans were lighting candles, while another man kept telling the story like it was just something that happened a long time ago. And for decades, the system watched all of it and did nothing.
There's also, you go into the book, that apparently there was supposed to be $1 million that Zip was supposed to bring back, but he ended up keeping the money and buying a nightclub with it.
KEEFE D became part of the legend itself. The man who seemed to know too much. The man who said too much. The man who was somehow always still free. At a certain point, it stopped feeling like a coincidence and started feeling like the universe was daring the truth to show up. And then it finally did. September 29th, 2023. A regular morning, Keefe D steps outside for a walk, 60 years old now. Almost 3 decades removed from that night in Vegas. And suddenly, the past stops being a story and starts being real again. Police move in. No speeches, no drama. Just hands behind the back, cuffs clicking, history shifting quietly on a sidewalk.
They're not only ugly on the outside, but they ugly on the inside too.
That moment shattered one of the biggest myths in this entire case. The idea that justice would never come. The idea that time would protect everyone involved. The idea that the Tupac case was too old, too messy, too untouchable. That myth died right there on a morning walk. A few days later, on October 5th, the body cam footage captures Keefe D being transported, first to LVMPD headquarters, then to Clark County Detention. The same man who had been talking freely for decades is now sitting in the back of a police vehicle, finally silent, finally listening instead of speaking. The same man who walked free for 27 years is now walking in chains.
Violating all my amendments and constitutional rights. I'm never supposed to be put in jail for this. Never.
Well, they're pointing to the interviews and the book.
Oh man, I didn't violate them.
And suddenly, everything starts lining up. The timeline becomes impossible to ignore. September 7th, 1996. The shots. September 13th, 1996. Tupac dies at 25. 4 wounds, 2 in the chest, 1 in the arm, 1 in the thigh. Then nothing. For decades. While one of the key figures in the story remains visible, vocal, and unbothered, the case does not go cold. It simply waits. 27 years of waiting is not just a number. It is a birthday missed. Music released without the man who made it possible. Mothers growing older with questions that never get answered. Fans growing up and passing the story down like a curse and a promise at the same time. The cruelty of that delay is hard to put into words. Justice is supposed to move fast because pain does not slow down. Grief does not take breaks. But this case stood still while the world moved on without Tupac. And now the weight of all those years is crashing into one courtroom.
The trial date will be set sometime next year, and that's good. I think everybody wants this case to proceed through the criminal justice system.
Because this is not just about one man being arrested. This is about a legend finally meeting evidence. This is about a story that refused to stay buried. This is about hip-hop being forced to sit down with its own history and finally face it. And now the future of this story has a date. August 10th, 2026. That is when the trial begins. That date is not just ink on a calendar. It is a collision point. Memory meets truth. Music meets law. A legend meets a system that once looked the other way. Every lyric Tupac ever wrote about struggle, betrayal, survival, and being seen suddenly feels heavier when you realize the man who lived it is finally being heard again in a courtroom. What does justice even look like after 30 years? That is the question sitting at the center of this case. Can a verdict repair decades of silence? Can a sentence give peace to a family that waited a lifetime? Can the culture that Tupac shaped finally exhale when the story closes? Nobody knows the answer yet.